Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Melissa Green, and I am the co founder and leader of Imaginarium. I know we have some new faces with us this afternoon, and I'm so glad that you're here. There's still a handful of people joining us that registered, and hopefully they will meander in and we'll let them in as they come. Obviously, we tried to set up extra protection this week just to keep it as safe as possible, especially in light of what happened back in April on one of our Zoom meetings. So Imaginarium, we are coming up on our 3rd-year anniversary. We were founded initially to try to create a space, ultimately to imagine a better world and then intentionally make it so. And we're figuring out day by day how we do that and how we do that better. We knew that we wanted to create a community that put humanity first over anything else. We center around values, specifically the 3 values as our inherent belief in that every single living person and thing in this world has inherent magic, its inherent worth and value. The second and equal belief is that we believe that we are deeply connected to each other, the world around us as well. And third, and equally important, that we believe in the inherent responsibility that we then have to each other and to the world around us. An Imaginarium is never telling you what that responsibility is, but making sure that you're constantly asking yourself, what is my responsibility in this moment to making the world better and changing it? So we're so glad that you're here. We gather like this during this whole season of COVID. We've been gathering weekly on Sunday afternoons. Prior to that, we gathered around once a month in person for gatherings, and then did other events, including concerts and getting involved in social action in our city, which most of us are based in Nashville, but Imaginarium has a lot of community outside of Nashville as well. And I know that includes some of you all that are joining us. So thanks for being here. We will have everybody stay muted until we do this participatory exercises. Will be just in a minute. There's also going to be space for dialogue at the end. That's been a part of what we do from the very beginning. That would never just be some person talking to us, but it'll be a conversation that we have together where we can all use our voices and engage with each other and ask questions and push back and all the lovely things. So there will be room for that. But every gathering that we've had, we have developed spiritual practices. We believe that all of life is spiritual, and that's why we still consider ourselves a spiritual community, although we are non-religious. But so these are some of our practices, and some of the rest of the lead team are going to lead us in those. So Lauren, you are up first.
Hi, everyone. Can y'all hear me okay? Cool. Great. It's lovely to see all of your faces or see your names for those of you that aren't joining us on video. The first practice that we start with is our naming practice, which is a very basic but meaningful practice of taking up your space in this gathering and symbolically in this world. And we do it both as, logistically a nice way to introduce ourselves, but also as a reminder to take up enough space, to take up your adequate space in this world, to think through when we're taking up too much space, to think through when we're not taking up enough space. And so it's very simple. All we do is go around, and it's a little bit counterintuitive because I will say your name to tell you when it's time for you to introduce yourself. But I'll call you out and say, Nathan, it's, you're going first, but we're just asking that you say your name, where you're calling in from, if you're comfortable, your preferred pronouns. And a lovely thing has been happening these last few gatherings where folks are choosing to describe some other words that they use to identify themselves. And so if that feels comfortable for you, please feel free to identify yourself whatever way you want. So I'll go ahead and start. I'm Lauren Pilney. I'm calling in from Nashville. My preferred pronouns are she and her. And Nathan, I'll call on you next.
Thanks. I'm Nathan. I'm calling from Lebanon, Tennessee, and he, him, his are my pronouns.
Great. Melissa?
Melissa, I'm here in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and a way that I like to describe myself is as a learner.
Love that. Cindy, you're up next on my screen.
Hi, Cindy Hoppus in Spring Hill, Tennessee, she, her.
Hi, Rick Hoppus.
Hey, Cindy. Hey, Rick. Tassima?
Very good. Great pronunciation. First try,
Oh, good.
Tassima Warren, Tampa, Florida. Pronouns she, her.
Great. Nice to meet you. Kendra?
Hi, I'm Kendra, she, her, hers, and I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Yay. Hi, Kendra. It says Linda, but I see Chris, so I don't know if you're both there or not.
How did her name get in there? That's very interesting. I'm Chris, calling from Brentwood, Tennessee. My wife will be joining us momentarily. He, him, she's cool with whatever pronouns. I'm newly awake, alive, and loved.
Love that. Malia?
Hi, I'm Malia Carden, she, her, hers, Brentwood, Tennessee.
Great. And Nina?
Hi, I'm Nina Coyle. I'm in Nashville, she, her, hers.
Great. Nice to see you. Abby?
Hey, I'm Abby Buter. I am calling from Tacoma, Washington, and she, her, hers pronouns.
Lovely. And Andre?
Hi, I'm Andre. I'm in Los Angeles, and my pronouns are he, him.
Perfect. Leah?
Hi there, I'm Leah. I live here in Nashville, Tennessee, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Great. Sarah?
I'm Sarah, and I'm calling from the Wisconsin Dells, and she, her, hers.
Amazing. Darren?
Hi, can you hear me? Did I do that right? Hi, I'm Darren. I'm currently calling in from just north of Nashville, and I'm she, her, hers. Excited to be here.
Great. Glad you're here. Ashley?
There we go.
There we go. Hi, Ashley Johns, Lebanon, Tennessee, she, her, hers.
Great. Cassie? Cassie, if you're talking, you may be on mute, but we may have lost you for a second. Okay, we'll move on. Molly?
Hey, Molly Kemp, calling from Nashville, Tennessee. She, her, hers.
And I'm Giorgio, he, him, his.
And we have baby Rivian, they, them, theirs. Our camera would be on, but we had a fussy day and we're nursing right now.
Great, it's great to hear your voices. And we may have a couple others joining. I think we may have just gotten Abby. Abby, are you there? We may not have her audio yet. Did I miss anyone? I think that we have everybody that's in the room at this current moment.
What about Cassie? We check back on Cassie.
Hey, I'm here. So sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Oh.
I'm Kathy Nickerson here in Nashville, and she, her, hers.
Yay.
Great. So happy y'all are here today.
All right, lovely. Oh, there's Abby. Abby, we are just finishing up the naming practice if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Abby Lane, she, her, hers. Anything else?
No,
Great.
that's lovely.
Perfect.
Lovely. Thank you, Lauren. Nathan, over to you, sir.
All right, so we have a practice of celebrating the good in the world, and it comes with a theme song, which goes a little something like this. Tell me something good. So if you will raise your hand in the participants window or in person, we can call you out and you can share with us something that's good in your life. And so others that have a gallery view, if you want to call them out, if because I can't see that.
Abby?
I have a job interview tomorrow, so I'm very excited. It's been kind of dead air of nothingness trying to apply for jobs amidst a pandemic, but I'm very excited to get an interview at like a really amazing foundation that works for health equity across Washington and just could be really great, a really great place to work. So I'm really excited about that.
Yay.
Chris Hauser, was that a thumbs up or I have something?
Sorry, it was just a thumbs up. I mean, I've thumbs. That's a good thing. Yay.
Oh, Malia.
So thanks to the hard work and diligence of some of our community members, Ben and Joy Lay, the lawsuit that they did against the state of Tennessee with the ACLU, I have a ballot that I can mail in August. So thankful that they've gone through all that, and I'm so excited to be able to vote by mail, just mostly by principle at this point. And maybe even to save my life because of, the stuff going on. So yeah, we're good. That's good.
Anyone else?
Leah.
See Leah.
Okay.
I am just, I don't know, my something good is I'm feeling really happy and relaxed and refreshed after my quasi vacation / house sitting. It's just really good to relax and be in another space and be with pets that just follow you around and like to cuddle and love you. And yeah, it was just a lovely little break. And so I'm happy for that.
Love it.
Go away.
Oh, Linda.
Linda.
Sorry, I saw them.
It's a silly little thing, but at the beginning of this year, I decided, well, not the beginning of the year, but the beginning of the spring, decided to plant a garden this year, which I haven't done in a few years. And when we have a compost pile, and when we harvested the compost, we just left it in a wheelbarrow for a while, and some little seed that was in there, still in there somehow surviving, decided to sprout, and it had 2 little leaves. And I'm the kind of person who's like, oh, I can't let you die. So I took care of it and I put it in a pot, and then I planted it, but I have no idea what it is. All this whole time it's a mystery plant. It has now taken over a good piece of the garden, and it appears to be a butternut squash. And it has several little tiny miniature butternut shaped squash on it. And so I will have butternut squash for everyone if it survives and gets to ripeness. So
I love that.
Something good.
There's a metaphor in there somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere.
Love it. I think Megan Moss had her hand raised. And Megan, if you want to introduce yourself and say your pronouns and stuff too, that'd be lovely.
Sure. Hi, Megan Moss, she, her. I'm in Nashville. I apologize for jumping in late. I had a mandatory work training. My something good is that I was accepted into a master's social work program.
Very good.
So exciting.
Love it. Sarah Onyx.
Yes. I'm in Wisconsin with my quarantine pod and my family, and we had a ladder ball championship that we have every year, and I'm a second-time champion, which is very fun. But more than that, I have had some really good conversations with my family, who are very different from me as far as politically and all things concerned on that end. And so it's been a really good week of honest conversations and hearing each other. And I'm just really thankful for that time. So
love it. Love it. Nathan, Molly has her hand up too.
Okay. Hey, Molly.
I'm just, so Rivian's gonna be 4 weeks on Wednesday, and this time is that we're first time parents, so this time it's been challenging, but it's just like, it's just so good, and my heart is so big, and I'm just getting little baby snuggles, and it's just been so good and such a sweet time to just be together as our little family, even through quarantine. No one can come visit us, but we're just spending this sweet time together and the slow days, and yeah, that's really good.
And baby's so healthy and well.
Love it.
It's amazing.
Love
Anyone
it.
else? If not, I will turn it over to Sarah, who will read our land practice.
Here at Imaginarium, we like to take a moment to just acknowledge the land, acknowledging the erasure of the people of the land, and acknowledging the people who once inhabited the land. And so wherever you are, take a moment to acknowledge that. And where I'm at, this is the land once inhabited by the Menominee people, the Winnebago people, and the Miami people. And so we know that that's a start to healing ourselves and healing the land. And as we're still in the beginnings of summer, maybe just consider aligning with the rhythms of this season, rhythms of slowness, of openness, and of light. And we know that that's necessary for bringing in wholeness and healing, and knowing, what's ours to do, and what we're responsible for in the world. So.
Love it. Thank you, Sarah. Nathan, one more back to you, sir.
Okay. So this is a somewhat new practice. We introduced it last week, but we find it, with everything that's going on, found that it was really important that we begin to acknowledge that we as a community need to be anti-racist. So we as a community recognize that white supremacy and systemic racism are an insidious part of our society. Intentional or not, we recognize the harmful impact of its presence in our lives and the impact it has on Black, Indigenous, and people of color members of this community and other communities around us. We commit ourselves to an active practice of anti-racism. We commit to rooting out and addressing racism wherever and whenever it exists, starting within each of us, but extending into our communities and into our greater world around us. So back to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Nathan. So this is my daughter, for those of you who don't know.
Hi.
You want to tell me your name and your preferred pronouns?
I am Haven and she, her.
And she leads our last practice.
So this is an embodiment practice to help you trust yourself and trust your body. So you put your fingers together like this. You go from thumb to pinky, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, sorry. And then you say, as you tap your fingers, you say stop, breathe, know your worth. All together.
Stop, breathe, know your worth.
One more time.
Stop, breathe, know your worth.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks, babe. So those are our practices, and we're so thankful that you were here to participate with us in those. And we hope that those things in small and large ways can continue to impact your week. We realized that we have to make it a practice to name the good in our world, and to be aware of the good, as well as be aware of all the negativity and everything that we're working towards tearing it down. We also want to uplift the good, and so we encourage you to try to do that daily. Also to take up your space, right, in the world. We take time to introduce ourselves to each other, so we remind ourselves that our space matters deeply, and to not take up too much space, as Lauren said, or to make sure you're taking up enough space to begin to, or continue to trust your body and to know your inherent worth and magic. And it's something that maybe each of us need to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say to ourselves before we walk out our door, or walk to another room. Some of us are working from home right now, but to truly know your magic and know all of your worth, and to trust our connections, and to name and understand the land that we're on and the type of orientation we want to make to this world. And those of us are here saying we want to be anti-racist in all that we do. So thank you for participating in that. I am so honored that Andre is with us this afternoon, early evening. we've been trying. The hope was to get him in person, and we started to plan some of that earlier this year. And then obviously everything happened. And so I circled back around and said, hey, can we make this happen in an online form? So I'm so thankful he said yes, and grateful to technology, right, that allows us to do this and continue to gather and be face to face without having to be in person. I'm going to read you a little bit of his bio, just in case you're unfamiliar with him. I know most of us are, and I'm grateful that we are. But the official bio, he's a speaker, a writer, and a musician, and I'll add so much more. He has a passion for making the invisible visible. In the summer of 2016, he began lugging a solid granite boulder around Los Angeles to show the weight of systemic racism on the Black psyche. Months later, he walked around dressed for a funeral with the names of the victims of state violence written on his jacket. And in response to the police-involved death of his mentally ill neighbor, J.R. Thomas, Andre founded an activist collective called Something Disruptive, dedicated to creative, nonviolent, direct action. He is a student of the nonviolent struggle and social change, including studying leadership and nonviolent movements for social change through Harvard Kennedy School. He specializes in using digital media to educate and mobilize audiences for racial justice and social progress. I found Andre online, I think through Tori Douglas. That's who I think my first introduction was to Andre, and just started following along and being so moved by what he was saying. And I only later, after started paying attention, did I realize he was also a brilliant artist and musician. And so he's put out some great music in these last couple of weeks. And so he's going to share a couple songs with us. Then we'll get to talk together. I have a couple questions that I'd love to know a little bit more, but then we're going to open it up to all of us. If you have questions or commentary, or even I would love for you to be listening intentionally to the words of his songs and what he's saying. And hopefully we could also talk about what this brings up in us in general, and also just during this time in our world. So Andre, thank you for being with us. I hand it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm going to play a few songs and we'll get into it. Preacher so-and-so, he don't got no good news for me. Even though I'm seeing bodies in the street like autumn leaves. She say, all I know is Jesus, man, it's all I know to preach. I guess Jesus doesn't care if I get killed by the police. I guess Jesus doesn't care if I get killed by the police. I guess Jesus doesn't care if I get killed by the police. I guess Jesus doesn't care if I get killed by the police. I guess Jesus doesn't care if I get killed by the police. So come on, that ain't no gospel too much. I thought the Christians were supposed to love their neighbors and such. But every Sunday I'm subjected to some mediocre lesson, having no specific reference to the world that I touch. Come on, this could not be the truth. This shit is not good news. If it's gonna be that way, I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I'm trying to keep it real. It's just the way I feel. This shit is not okay. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. Deacon so-and-so, she think that I should cut my hair. She don't like my dirty mouth. She don't like anything I wear. She don't like the way I swing my hips when I be in the pew. But she got nothing to say about the lies I pass for news. She got nothing to say about the lies I pass for news. She got nothing to say about the lies I pass for news. She got nothing to say about the lies I pass for news. She got nothing to say about the lies I pass for news. Come on, is that the guy that you know? Cause what I'm wearing has some bearing on the state of my soul. But does he care about the neighborhood? Just tell me, is he looking? Are you saying that the Savior couldn't save me? Cause my hoodie, come on. This could not be the truth. This shit is not good news. If it's gonna be that way, I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I'm trying to keep it real. It's just the way I feel. This shit is not okay. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. No, I'm not waking up for church this Sunday. I still believe in the one God who hovered over the chaos, who heard the cries of slaves in the brickyard, yeah, and waged war on the old gods. I still believe in the one God. the one that got the king and them worshipped. But if you're not gonna preach on him, then I'm not gonna listen. No, I'm just speaking my truth. This shit is not good news. If it's gonna be that way, I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I'm trying to keep it real. It's just the way I feel. This shit is not okay. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. I don't think I'll go to church this Sunday. No, I'm not waking up for church this Sunday. Ooh. Ooh. I see the children across the sea, left on the shore like trash and debris. I hear a nation sigh relief, but it doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be this way. Shattering windows, flashing lights. Bullets tear the dark skin of the night. The sound of mothers swearing at the skies. Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be. Oh, it doesn't have to be this way. Oh, you a little lower than the angels. There's a little bit of heaven in you. Oh, you, the power you've been given is a power you should live in. Oh, the world is in the shape that we choose. I hear the beast declare his lies. See all the people with flags held high. I see the world descend and fall, but it doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be. Have to be this way. It doesn't have to be. Yeah. Doesn't have to be this way. It don't have to be. No. Doesn't have. No, 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 no. He was alive for just a few days, but scared someone at the park with his little toy gun. Little baby boy and a threat. You would cry for him, but we don't have many tears left saying, oh, oh, how long must we sing these songs? Whoa, how long Must we sing these songs? No, it won't stop because we're upset. And it won't stop because of our fear. No, it won't stop until we repent of all the black bodies broken around here. She was alive for just a few days. Tore the world apart with the broken light on the back of her car. More sin that leaded to death. Yeah, we cry for her, but we don't have many tears left saying, oh, whoa, how long must we sing these songs? Whoa, how long, yeah, must we sing these songs? No, it won't stop because we're upset, and it won't stop because of our fear. No, it won't stop because we need rest. No, it won't stop because of our tears. No, it won't stop until we confess all the blood that we spill around here. No, it won't stop until we repent of all the black bodies broken around here. All the black bodies broken around here. All the black bodies broken around here. No, it won't stop until we repent of all the black bodies broken around here. Whoa, yeah. Whoa. Oh, yeah. Won't stop because we're upset. Won't stop because of our fear. Won't stop because we need rest. Won't stop because of our tears. Won't stop until we confess all the blood that we spill around here. Won't stop until we repent of all the black bodies broken around here. Oh, say, boy, yo, boy, yo, boy, yo, boy, yo. Whoa, how long must we sing these songs? Whoa, whoa, how long must we sing these songs? No, it won't stop because we're upset, and it won't stop because of our fear. No, it won't stop because we need rest. No, it won't stop because of our tears. No, it won't stop till we confess all the blood that we spill around here. No, it won't stop until we repent of all the black bodies broken around here. All the black bodies broken around here. All the black bodies broken around here. No, it won't stop until we repent of all the black bodies broken around here. All the black bodies broken around here. All the black bodies broken around here. No, it won't stop until we repent of all the black bodies broken around here. Thank you.
Ah, thank you, Andre. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to just take a minute, let everyone breathe that in, all of it. I'm interested, Andre, if you could give us a glimpse of what you grew up with spiritually. What were you given?
Sure. Yeah, so I was I grew up in the Assemblies of God denomination in Stone Mountain, Georgia. So I grew up Pentecostal and around a lot of those like kind of charismatic Christian traditions. Went to church because my grandma, my grandma took me to church, and that's where I found out or I heard about Jesus. And just as a kid, I think, when you hear a story like that, I mean, as a kid, I just understood, oh, Jesus wants to be my friend, and he wanted to be my friend really badly, like so badly that he gave his life. And so, you tell a kid something like that, they're like, oh, I want to be that guy's friend too. So that was kind of how I ended up in church and grew up in that world.
Yeah, I saw Southeastern on your. That's where you went your
Yeah.
undergraduate. Is that the one in Florida?
Yes, in Lakeland, Florida. That's my alma mater.
Andre, that's my husband's alma mater.
Oh, is it?
Oh, the tangled webs. So, how did you? Okay, so let's fast forward. After college, then, assuming you were in a similar mindset in similar communities all throughout college.
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, I was a very devout evangelical for a long time, and in my time in Southeastern was, I mean, for me, very formative, and I loved my time there. And I think that things didn't really change until after I moved. So when I graduated, I moved to New York City. I was the worship pastor and teaching pastor at a church there called Glad Tidings Tabernacle, 100-year-old church. And I kind of saw that church implode because of some denominational, like I would just say it's corruption within the denomination. And then I left there questioning a bunch of stuff. Moved to Los Angeles to get a degree at Fuller Seminary because I thought, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be in full-time ministry, so maybe I'll like become an Old Testament professor or something like that. And um, just a little bit of time in the Ancient Near Eastern program at Fuller convinced me that I do not want to be an Old Testament scholar. But it was also like I was moving to Los Angeles while the Ferguson riots were going on in the wake of the death of Michael Brown. And so I think that you could say that the Black Lives Matter movement kind of hit this peak while I was getting my seminary degree. And I started talking about racial justice a lot. And a lot of those folks that I met, from going to church in Stone Mountain, Georgia growing up, people I met at Southeastern University who were training for ministry with me at the time, started coming out of the woodwork and kind of showing me how deeply entrenched white supremacy is with evangelical Christianity, which is something that I hadn't realized. I didn't realize. I mean, I thought that the people in my life and that I'd met were just kind of ignorant of racial dynamics and all of that. And then to learn through these conversations that many of them just kind of held to racist ideas without acknowledging or refusing to see the racist content in it. And then later that year, Donald Trump being elected with 81% of white evangelicals voting for him, like all of those, like it was like this lining up, this series of events that with the election of Donald Trump kind of being the nail in the coffin.
Yeah. So a lot of the people in this community who are regulars have either grown up in evangelical church. Some of them are still maybe somewhat tethered to church, maybe not evangelical church, but a lot of us feel like we're post church people for all the things that you've mentioned. I think growing up for me, I grew up thinking, well, my theology is this pure thing that I have, right? But then I can start looking at all the issues in the world, and only to later understand that it was the theology that was messed up and that was carrying these injustices. I had a great professor 2 years ago that said you can't do justice work in America without understanding the contamination of theology. And although I find myself outside of institutional church, I still am finding the deeper I want to be involved in doing justice work, you have to speak to these things because it's ingrained in who America is, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, just hearing what you're saying.
Yes. So when you sing, so tell me this, when you're writing these songs now, do you feel like, is your audience still the church? Who's your intended audience with these?
I mean, I don't really have an intended audience, honestly, for the music. It's just, just trying to tell the truth about my experience and whatnot, But I'm definitely not targeting Christians and church folks, which is interesting because I have friends that are famous Christian musicians or post-Christian, like my music shows up with worship music on Spotify and stuff. And I'm like, y'all need to listen to this music before,
That's funny. Well,
like,
I mean, I'd
the
hope.
only song that talks about Jesus really is the first song that I sang about like not going to church because, of hearing evangelical pastors tell me that God doesn't care about racism. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. And I wonder for you, for me, I thought I've seen it's a problem in a lot of different iterations of Christianity in America, not just the evangelical church. There's some people doing amazing work, and we've talked about it a lot here at Imaginarium. We're not anti-church people or anti-religious. We're just, some of us are post that. But I mean, I hear your songs and I'm like, I wish people in the church were hearing them. Right?
Well, apparently some churches are playing like some of those songs in their, at least like at some point, right, in their Sunday morning service, which is interesting, especially the first one playing hooky. Like I'm hearing that there's some churches that are playing that like before and after church, which is super interesting to me. It's ironic.
Right. But good.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that some are listening. I mean, I think that the type of church that's playing that is probably the kind of church that doesn't really need the message.
Sure. So can we talk a little bit about what your justice work looks like literally on the ground in LA for you? Because you're in LA area, right? Still?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles, and it looks different ways. So I work for an organization that right now their name is Evangelicals for Social Action. They're changing their name to Christians for Social Action. And they're based out of Philadelphia. So what I do, what my life looks like day to day, is a lot of strategizing and applying a lot of the reading and experience that I have around social movements, social justice movements. I have like a couple of mentors that have helped plan revolutions in other countries and topple dictators and stuff like that. So I try to apply that knowledge and that information to the work that I'm doing there at Evangelicals for Social Action. I run the Racial Justice Institute. So it's a lot of intellectual work because when we talk about social change, a lot of times we know that social movements are helpful. We know that like what we saw or what we've seen right now with people going out to the streets and protesting and boycotting and all of that helps. It's vital. It's important. But what people don't understand is that movements are way more successful when people actually approach it kind of like an army going to war, where they before you go into battle, you have to get a profound understanding of the conflict situation, what they call it in military strategy. So you need to know what the geography is like, what the topography is like of the region that you're going to be fighting in. You need to know what the cultures are in the area that you're going to be fighting in, what their political system is like, how long does it take for them to deploy troops from point A to point B. You need to take all that information in an assessment and then make your battle plans based on the understanding that you have. And the same is true of nonviolent movements, of getting a profound understanding of the conflict situation so that you can plan your nonviolent tactics and your campaigns and all that kind of stuff based on that information. So that's what I do from day to day. Then after work, I support Black Lives Matter Pasadena. And so what I'm doing with them is kind of trying to incorporate that same thing into the work that they're doing as activists, but also we're doing a lot of actions on Fridays. We're protesting, we're blocking traffic, you know, um, announcing to our neighbors that we're there and that we're listening to them, and that we want to create like this people's budget in Pasadena so that they can reallocate funds from policing. There's like, I think it was $89 million that Pasadena puts into policing. Um, Whereas, we could invest that money into mental health and all that kind of stuff. So I'm working with them in that way. And then outside of that, I do a lot of writing about racial justice, educating through my weekly email and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of racial justice work. It's a lot of trying to help people understand how societies change through collective action, through the collective action of ordinary people.
Love it. You're a busy man.
Yeah.
Plus, and you're like frequently on Twitter in the midst of all of that, also posting a ton for us to engage with.
Yeah.
It's so funny listening to you. I feel like when I started Imaginarium with a handful of people that are on this call right now, I think we were so ready to be active. Like that was sort of the push. Like we're going to be a community of action. That was like, we've come out of this church, we've come out of church setting, we want to be more active. And what we quickly found and stumbled into was like, wait, there's still a lot more we need to learn and unlearn. So I'm so glad you explained what you do, and it now makes total sense to me that that's part of the work that a lot of us need to be doing. Is not only are there ways that we need to get our hands dirty and act, but to know, like you said, the context in which this work is being done, and not to rush in and try to dismantle something without also being ready to build the better, and what should the better look like, and to be in constant, like we've said, we have deep conversation partners and deep relationships, and some of this has been, and relationship work is slow work, right? It's not just bring in someone to speak to us and then be done with it. It was like, no, let's grow some relationships, specifically with people here in Nashville. Again, this community is larger than just Nashville, but that's been a lot of our process, and owning like, okay, we're coming at this wrong, and thankfully slowly figuring it out. Can you talk a little bit more about Hope and Hard Pills in general? I love the name. I'd love for you to talk about the name. Also, I'll just mention you talking about being the on the ground activist. When I attended your and it's a collective, right? At least the host, yeah. So when you did the collective Zoom meeting during Juneteenth, right?
Yeah.
I was so impressed that they're like, Andre's gonna sing, because I thought Hope and Hard Pills was you, and I was understanding it's a collective now, but you're like, I'm gonna sing a song, but then I gotta go because I gotta be on the ground like with the people tonight. And I just thought that was a beautiful move by a representative and a leader too. That spoke highly to me as another leader trying to figure out what a collective looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Well, so Hope and Hard Pills it started as my email newsletter as a writer, and like I said, I've been reading and studying so much about social change, and what I found is that the things that I was reading about nonviolent struggle, about collective action, are just not common sense to us. It's just stuff that no one teaches us, no one tells us about how these things work. And so I was reading things that were really opening my eyes to how much power we have to change our societies from the ground up. And I started feeling like, well, people need to know this. So I started this email newsletter. Well, I started blogging every week, but I started the newsletter to go along with the blog. And the idea was I wanted for it to be like Seth Godin's blog for social change. Like Seth Godin is a marketing expert for y'all who are not familiar, and he sends out like these very like concise messages, like I think maybe daily, about marketing. And it's just to give you a little tidbit about marketing. And I was like, well, what if there was a Seth Godin's blog for ordinary people who want to change the world? So that began with my email list. And I wanted to expose people, like thousands of people joined like the day I announced I was starting the list, 800 people joined the list, which was like super surprising to me. And I was like, oh, so it started growing really fast. And I was like, I want these people on the list to have access to the same people who have changed my life and helped me to see what our power is. And so we started a podcast and started interviewing some of the folks I told you about, like Serge Popovich, who led a nonviolent revolution in Serbia that overthrew the dictatorship of Slobodan Milosevic, Michael White, who co-founded Occupy Wall Street, Bree Newsom, who climbed the flagpole and took down the Confederate flag, like all these different people. I was like, people need to hear from these folks and understand, like, get some practical insight about how to change the world. It just kept growing, and I was like, I can't do all this work by myself. So I started asking friends that I knew that were really talented at, like, my friend Corey, who's a great podcaster. He's just like a great thinker. My friend Nandi, who also like, she's brilliant. Or sorry, they are brilliant, and bringing them in and just allowing them to take on ownership of different parts of that platform. So the event on Juneteenth was supposed to be my listening party for my new single, How Long, which is the last song that I sang. But we were planning for that before all these waves of protests happened. And now that there are Black Lives Matter actions happening in my neighborhood, it just felt like, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that we're doing that work on the ground. And so I didn't think that it would be right to like tell the neighborhood, like, I would have been there, but I had a show online. So we had already arranged for Nandi to host the meeting and for Alicia, my podcast host, to be there on the panel. So we left it to them. So anyway, that to say, Hope and Hard Pills is a bunch of things. It's a newsletter, it's a podcast. We're doing nonviolence training courses now. We're about to launch one next week. So basically, it's this kind of family of resources and media to help people understand things about how ordinary people can work together to change the world that they won't hear most places, like unless they were going to go get a political science degree or they were going to do what I did and like try to read every single book that you can find on the subject. We want to bring it all to them. So it's growing into a collective and growing into like a much larger platform than what I had in mind when it started.
It's all good. And the other night, even after you left, it was brilliant. The three of them.
Yeah, I heard. Brilliant. Yeah. And I was like just blown away that Didi Delgado, who does a lot about direct reparations work, that she wanted to join, or that she was willing to join us for the conversation, and Michelle Higgins. So I knew that that group of people was going to be amazing. And I think the thing that just kind of happened also automatically, just organically with our group, is how many Black women and Black non-binary people, Black LGBTQ people just have, taken on a lot of leadership with Hope and Hard Pills. Like the podcast, I don't think we even, I think we had like maybe 6 or 7 episodes before we had interviewed a male. And we didn't make that decision consciously. It just kind of happened. So anyway, all that to say, like, I'm always blown away by the caliber of, or the quality of work that's being produced by the team. And I also just, from time to time, I just literally am just like in awe of how many brilliant people are working with us.
It's great. So y'all, I would love for us to open the room, if you will. If you have questions for Andre or anything that's being brought up in you from what he said or from his music, please, please, please raise your hand and let's talk about it. Megan.
Thank you so much for everything you've shared. And I'm curious what your favorite social movement authors are.
Okay, yeah, that's hard because I'm always reading about social change, but right now, someone that I really appreciate. Well, Serja obviously is someone I really appreciate, Serja Popovich, because his book Blueprint for Revolution, it it summarizes like the entire canon of nonviolent struggle in like 200 pages, and it's really fun. Like he's he's very playful, and the way that he writes is very accessible. And so you'll, if you read his book, you would catch all these other names of people that you should read, but you would already pretty much be familiar with like the gist of their work. So Serja is definitely one. His name is spelled Srdja, Serja Popovich. And then Eric McBay, Eric spelled with an Aric. Eric McBay is also another that I really appreciate. He has a book called Full Spectrum Resistance. It has 2 volumes. And I also think if you read Blueprint for Revolution and you read Full Spectrum Resistance, you would have pretty much all the information that you need about nonviolent struggle and social change. They're great overviews. Full Spectrum Resistance is a little bit harder to read because it's very, very thorough. But yeah, I would say those two are some of my favorites.
You also just put out a resource list, right? Currently, just yesterday, did I see that?
That's a good question. We're always putting out resource lists, so I don't know.
It was like an Amazon link.
Oh, right, exactly. That's my for my library. So I try to upload. I can send you the link later if you want to send that out later. But
yeah,
we do have like an Amazon page where I basically just try to mark great books about social change and anti-racism so that people can kind of look through my library and buy things that appeal to them.
Right. Who else? Lauren.
Hi, Andre. Thank you for all of that. I'm one of the people that Melissa was talking about that is constantly pushing for action, action, action. We need to be doing, doing, doing. And I think one of my biggest wake up moments in the last few months has been the need to go back to being a student, and realizing how little I know and how much I still have to learn. And I guess I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or guidance for like how to do those things in parallel, and like when it's appropriate to act when you don't, like when your knowledge still feels so insignificant, but still there's the need to be doing something and being a presence in certain spaces. So I just wonder if you have any thoughts on how to balance those two things.
Yeah, I think that first, I think that educating yourself is taking action. So I like to first off, like, not make a distinction between those things necessarily, because I think that's one of the most important things that people can do is to inform themselves. But I also think that there's nothing wrong with like showing up to especially spaces for action as a helper, right? So Daniel Hunter has a book called Building a Movement to End the New Jim Crow. And he talks about how there are four different roles that you can think of for people in social movements. So there are helpers, organizers, advocates, and rebels. So in this movement for Black freedom and for Black lives, we want for Black people to be centered as leaders. We want, especially those who are the most vulnerable. So we want for, Black trans women to be leading. We want for Black women to be leading. And of course, Black men too. But so anyway, we want to center those folks. So showing up to those spaces as a helper, I think is very important. Like showing up. So my role, always say everyone has a role to play. My role, the first Black Lives Matter meeting we had here in Pasadena recently, was I just showed up with Lysol wipes and I cleaned the microphone after people used it and offered people hand sanitizer, right? Like, that was my role. you know. Uh, I think that people need to feel comfortable showing up as helpers in that way, right? Like, even if it's just that, like, if it's not holding the bullhorn, it's not, talking to the press, but it's just showing up and taking responsibility for some of the operational stuff that needs to happen, some of the administrative stuff that needs to happen. So those are a couple things I would say that educating yourself is taking action. And then also, like, if you're not sure about what kind of leadership, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. I think that in any way that we take responsibility for being a part of making change happen, we're taking on leadership, right? So there are folks who show up for the one action or the one march and they disappear. But the people who say, I'm in this struggle until I see some kind of change, and I'll take on whatever role is available to me that also fits within my gifts and talents and stuff like that, they are taking on leadership. So, but I do think that there's nothing wrong with showing up to any space and saying, I don't have all the answers. I'm not trained in, maybe I'm not trained in nonviolence or de-escalation, or, maybe I can't contribute the big things, but to show up as a helper and play a supporting role. White people in general, though, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, I think that white people actually should be taking on leadership, though, in ways that are white facing, right? So, white people do need to organize a mass movement to liberate white people from white supremacy and anti-Black ideas. And white people need to take on leadership in building that kind of movement while also being accountable to Black voices and people of color that can be trusted to help them, to do that work well.
Thank you. That's so good. I wrote down so much.
Chris, yes, I see you. Jump in, Chris.
Hey, Andre, longtime fan, first time caller. Thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
Today. I experience you as hopeful and joyful, and I'm glad for that. But it does shock me a little bit, because as I get into the depths of some of this since George Floyd and am finding more of my voice, I feel very discouraged, and even saying that feels so privileged, because I don't have your experience at all.
Yeah.
But as I run up against so many of my friends on social media who just don't see it, they're not interested. They don't see the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I get discouraged and I feel hopeless. So what brings you hope? What's given you hope even in the last month?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, I don't think of hope as a possession. So, and I don't think of it as an inner quality that people have. I think of hope as a couple of things. First, hope is a humility about the future. So I read a book called Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit, where she says that optimists are sure or certain that no matter what they do or what happens, that everything's going to be all right. And pessimists tell themselves that they're certain that no matter what we do, no matter what happens, everything is going to turn out badly. And both of them excuse themselves from action in doing so. And that's how I came to the conclusion, very much inspired by her, that hope is a humility about the future, that in not knowing what will happen tomorrow, I can't say that no matter what, everything will turn out good. And I also can't say that despite all of our work that, we're going to fail in the future. And because I don't know what's going to happen in the future, I have the ability to at least contribute the possibility that there might be something good, right? That I can influence the outcome of the future. So I tend to tell people, which leads me to the second thing. So it's a humility about the future. It's an understanding of our own agency and our own power. So I tell people that history is not a story that's happening to us, but one that we are writing together. So that we understand that in the uncertainty about the future, that we have some kind of, we get a vote, you know, we have some kind of power to influence the income, the outcome. So humility about the future, and understanding of our agency, and the way that we understand our agency is by analogy. It's by historical analogy, or what I would say memory. So it's humility, it's an understanding of our agency, and it's also based on our memory. So the reason why I used to think I couldn't be a hopeful person is because I used to think of hope as a possession or as an inner quality. Some people are just naturally optimistic, or some people are just naturally more positive. I am not naturally a positive person. I'm a number 4 on the Enneagram, so I'm prone to melancholy and depression, and I have very low lows and have had very low lows my entire life. I've lived with depression my entire life, which is super interesting to me because people do tell me all the time that I make them feel hopeful and I encourage them, and I appreciate that about my life. and and joy is at the center of my work, and hope is at the center of my work, but it doesn't come naturally for me. That's the point. It doesn't come naturally to me to to operate in that way, and this has to do with memory. I didn't think I could be hopeful because I'm not naturally that kind of person. But once I understood that hope is a humility about the future and an understanding of our agency, I also began to realize that that our understanding of our agency comes from memory, which is why I said historical. Um, I said something about historical something, I remember, but but it had to do with memory, and our memory of it's our memory of the ways that ordinary people have already acted together in the past and created some kind of change. That's the memory that we have to hold. That memory becomes the grounds for hope. The reason I thought that I couldn't be hopeful before is because people suggested that you just be hopeful for no reason, and that just wasn't acceptable to me. I'm like, that's delusion, that's wishful thinking, that's not hope. But hope is the memory that, you know, my ancestors, without weapons, without the military force behind them to challenge the violent regime of the United States, were able to at least push racial progress so far as to remove whites only signs from restaurants and water fountains and bathrooms, and to desegregate buses and school systems and all this kind of stuff. Now, we've not made all the progress that we should, and we've not made all the changes that we need to, but I at least can mostly expect to leave my home and come back in relative peace, right? Like, I don't think that one of my neighbors might lynch me today. You know, the police are another story, but my neighbors, I'm not worried about in that way. And so with those things combined, like, those are the things that give me hope, is that I have studied the history of nonviolent struggle, and I am convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that people have the power to oppose and dismantle oppressive systems because it has happened before. And that is the grounds for me to believe that it can happen again. It's not a matter of whether it's possible, but whether or not we are willing, whether or not we have the political desire and the imagination to pursue those things, to clarify those goals, and to pursue them strategically and tenaciously until they've become a reality. Last thing is that, so understanding like how I conceptualize hope, like I had to actually practice it. So like, I don't think about hope as an inner quality or an inner disposition or a possession that we have, but I consider hope something like a muscle. It's something that you train, something that you discipline. And the way that I did that, because I was very low, like this is like 2017, I was like feeling very discouraged. But after all the, like a year of protests, you know, one of my neighbors was shot in the head by a police officer. And I, you know, my friends and I, we all got together and we are just feeling really down about this. And so I was struggling. And um, when my friend Paul sent me the book I mentioned earlier, Hope in the Dark, I started using that as in the same way that some people might use a devotional. I would just set aside some time every day and I'd read a chapter of Rebecca Solnit's book. And that gave me an idea. Like, I need to just order as many books about hope as possible. And so I did. I ordered The Impossible Will Take a Little While by Paul Rogat Loeb. I ordered another one called Radical Hope, which is, these are collections of essays and letters from, you know, John Lewis and Nelson Mandela and Marion Wright Elderman and all these others. And so I would sneak off to my favorite burger joint during my lunch break in Pasadena with my book under my arm, and I'd sit there and I'd read something about hope so that I could exercise that muscle. And so that's the reason why hope drives what I do, because I understand that um, in order for there to be change, we need millions of people to organize for it. But people won't organize if they won't organize for a fight that they don't believe that they can win. So that's why I say, like, hope is the fuel of revolution. Without hope, there won't be any kind of revolution, because people will only fight battles they think that they will win or they can win. They think there's a possibility of winning. So I lead with hope because I understand that we have the grounds for hope, and that hope actually mobilizes and sustains people in a way that outrage and anger can't. You know, not that they're bad. Like, I also am very angry at white supremacy. I'm angry at white people who refuse to acknowledge it and to defect from it. I'm angry at this American system that continues to perpetuate it. But I also know that anger will burn you out, you know. And so that's why hope is there, and the joy is there, because I believe that we deserve it. You know, I may not be the kind of Christian that I used to be, but I still believe, and I think that it's my Christian background, my upbringing, that leads me to believe that life is about, that we're here to enjoy it, right? Like, the meaning of life is to enjoy the time that we have here. That's what I believe. I think that injustice is a problem because it gets in the way of people's joy. And so we dismantle these systems so that people can enjoy life, you know, and we oppose these systems so that people can enjoy life. I come to that conclusion from the fact that, when, like, one of the first stories we have in the Bible is God creating these naked human beings and putting them in a garden called delight or pleasure. That's the Hebrew word. Eden means delight, pleasure, bliss, or something like that. So for me, like, it's important to be joyful because Black people cannot spend their entire lives in this serious mode of fighting white supremacy. We deserve better than that. We deserve to enjoy our lives just like anybody else. And so one of the most defiant things, I do my work out of defiance. So, like, when oftentimes people they come to my racial justice work and they're like, you're supposed to be a bridge between Black and white people. I'm like, I never said that I'm a bridge. I am not a bridge. You may not walk on me. You know, I I do what I do in defiance of white supremacy. I say what I say because I know that the white world does not want me to. You know, I do some of these things because I know it upsets white people. And it is my right to upset white people with the truth about the racist world that their ancestors built and that they continue to perpetuate. So the joy is also a part of that. It's to say that I drug that boulder around Los Angeles to show how systemic racism can be a burden on the mental, on the psyche of Black people. And I realized that I cannot live my entire life dragging that boulder around. Like, I deserve to take dance breaks and eat churros and make sexy R&B music and all of that stuff because I'm a human being. And so I continue to operate out of that place of joy because I want to defy white supremacy's mission, which is to borrow some Bible language, to steal, kill, and destroy.
So good. I just want you to keep talking. That was a whole book. Everything you just said. I hope that you have that in written form or will have that. I want to respect your time, Andre. We have 2 quick questions if you're okay.
Sure. I took a long time to
No.
answer that one, so I'm sorry I ate up the time for more questions.
Please don't apologize. That all was so good. Okay, I know Sarah and Leah. So Sarah, you go first, and then Leah, and then we'll close up, y'all.
Awesome. Hey, Andre, thanks so much. This has been awesome. I hear a lot about cancel culture, reading a lot about it. And I hear like one of your lyrics, if I'm not mistaken, it says, the world is in the shape that we choose. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that as it relates to social change.
Okay, let me make sure that I understand. So
yeah, I guess cancel culture, social change, like what, like,
got it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I don't see cancel culture actually being effective, right? Like there are so many people who have been canceled that, I mean, they're living their life, you know what I mean? Like Louis C.K. just put out doesn't he have a new comedy special on Netflix or something? Kanye just signed a deal with some huge shoe company. You know, these folks don't actually go away, right? So I do understand like the criticism of us being dismissive, especially when it becomes like this purity code, right? Like when someone shows that y'all might be aligned on tons of values, but there may be one thing that you don't agree on, and then people say, okay, well, everybody, we need to forget that person. Like I understand the critique of that because we're all in process, right, of wrestling through different ideas, different values, different praxis. And so, you know, if we're not careful, we can become like fundamentalists, you know, or like Pharisees, and we have like this basically this social justice creed or this liberal creed or progressive creed or whatever, and everyone has to assent mentally or intellectually to all of these points, or else you're out of the club, right? So I think that's the danger of it. At the same time, we have to, I'm wrestling with this myself. I was just about to go down another path, but then I realized, as someone who, I believe that we need to be abolitionists, right? And because we still have like what one scholar says, we're living in the aftermath of slavery, the afterlife of slavery. So as a Christian-ish person, I do think about this, like, I don't know if I believe in life or death for human beings, but I know that there's an afterlife for systems of oppression, because we had an Emancipation Proclamation that, you know, ordered the plantations to be shut down, but those things developed into prisons, and that the slave patrol evolved into the police departments that we have all over the United States. So I definitely believe that there is an afterlife for systems of oppression, because I'm living in the wake of them. Anyway, I went down that rabbit trail and kind of forgot the path that I was on. How do I tie that back in? What was that? Why did I start saying that?
About cancel culture and the issues with liberals and progressives becoming fundamentalists.
Oh, right. Yes.
Like check the boxes.
Right. So, basically, I'm saying that, like, I see the critique of, you know, of us trying to get everyone to hold to these purity codes. Oh, this is what I was saying. As an abolitionist, you know, there's this question about what do we do with people who cause harm, right? Like, and the reason I said abolitionist is because the afterlives of these systems of oppression continue to live. So they are continuing in the tradition of slavery's violence, and therefore, if those institutions are carrying on the same violence and praxis of enslavement, then that means that we're still living in the age of enslavement. And if we're living in the age of enslavement, then what else could we be but abolitionists? You know, we talk about allies and all this kind of stuff. I'm not really interested in white allies. I'm interested in which white people realize we're living in the age of enslavement and are ready to become abolitionists. But a part of abolitionist thinking and abolitionist practice means that we have to think about how do we address harm without also perpetuating the same systems that we're claiming that we want to dismantle. So we end up like kind of in this this kind of dilemma with folk like the officers who killed George Floyd or Mike Brown or Breonna Taylor, because the thing that we start clamoring for is saying, well, we want for them to be arrested and imprisoned. Well, aren't we against the system of policing and against the system of mass incarceration? But we're stuck in this dilemma where our only imagination for justice is to be retributive in that way. Okay, so cancel culture is related to this in a way, because cancel culture says that the only thing that we can imagine to do with people who cause harm is to dispose of them, right? So how can we actually hold people accountable for causing harm without disposing of them as human beings? Because the only way that we're going to be able to do something about those more violent systems of oppression and violence that basically disappear people, that strip people of their human rights, that abuse them, that regard them as disposable, is to get rid of, you know, the spirit of that cancellation in culture. Prison is cancel culture, you know. Offing unarmed Black citizens is cancel culture. You know. And I think that I actually did see an article about how like cancel culture works for white folks and people who hold privilege and power in that way, because they actually have the power to do so, right? So anyway, all that to bring it back down and say, if we actually want to be abolitionists, then we have to be thinking not just, we have to break down the partition between these things, where we think that saying, okay, we want to be done with harming people who cause harm through the prison industrial complex, like, and somehow that's different from, you know, cutting off a friend because, you know, they broke up with, you know, cutting off your friend's boyfriend because they broke up with your friend, right? Like, or because they caused harm. We have to start thinking about, well, how do we hold people accountable without doing this like eye for an eye thing, or saying because you don't believe these things or because you did this bad thing, you know, you don't deserve you're unworthy of restoration. You're beyond redemption. You don't deserve community. You don't deserve love, you know, and we should never uh, receive any, you no longer have anything to offer the world. We have to just move away from that if we actually want to create a new world. And I really do believe that these large, you know, systems, that you can trace like the logic of those systems down to mundane individual exchanges in society.
Thank you. That was so great.
Damn, Andre, I want to right now personally invite you back to let's just talk about that next time, because that, I feel like we should and can go on and on about what you just brought up. So thank you, Sarah, for that question. Leah, sorry, I don't mean to hurry you, but Leah, you were up and last, lady.
Oh no, that's cool. Again, Andre, thank you for being here and
my pleasure.
Everything that you have said. Something that stood out to me when you were first talking about hope and hard pills was you kept on repeating the phrase of like ordinary people, like equipping ordinary people to change the world.
Yeah.
How much of that is equipping individuals to do individual work versus bringing people together, and where it kind of is the the
It depends
balance of
on what kind of change people want to see, you know, but if we want to see the, like, if we want for our culture to change and for our institution, like our praxis of society to change, then we have to think about working in groups. We have to think about collective action, because the power that we have to change the world is really collective power. So there's a book called Hegemony How To by Jonathan Smucker that talks about this really well. And Jonathan was a one of the lead activists in the Occupy movement. And basically what he talks about is how we have to think about moving entire social blocks of people. And part of why we need to do that is because, and this goes back to the question about hope, I think, and not burning out, is that we have to understand that the thing that results in social progress is struggle, right? Like we are in an actual contest for power with those who would like to use power to maintain a system where racism and anti-blackness is our common sense. And the reason why that's important to remember is because if we remember that we are actually in a fight, then we don't get discouraged when we get hit. You know, you have to understand that getting hit is a part of being in a fight. The other part, and this is why I'm saying that we have to think about social blocks, is that in a fight, let's make this like let's, if you're a trained fighter, you understand the issue of balance, right? You need to have a strong stance so that you're not easily knocked down. Well, when we're thinking about this as individuals and individual change against systemic problems and structural problems, what small groups of people do is you might knock that regime of violence off balance for a second, but you need to be able to knock the regime of violence off balance and hit it while it's off balance, you know? And the thing is, when we're thinking about each one teach one, we're not moving forcefully enough or quick enough to actually knock the regime down. We're giving it too much time to regain its stance and regain its balance and to remain steady. So what it really takes is groups of people that have organized themselves and identified the vulnerable spots of the system of oppression and have gone through, done the research to understand in what ways they are able to wield power over those vulnerable targets of the system of oppression. And the way that you figure that out is by asking, well, where in this system does it depend on the mass participation of ordinary people? Because that means that the power of that system actually needs your cooperation and your consent in order to function. Okay, well, if you know that there's a bunch of people who are, who through their banking, like a bunch of people because they bank with Chase, that they're also supporting the, gosh, what do they call that again? The fossil fuel industry. That's it. That Chase is one of the largest supporters of the fossil fuel industry. So if you realize that you've got a bunch of people that are banking at Chase, and Chase is a huge pillar of support to the fossil fuel industry, you can organize those people to say, okay, we have a petition, we got 1 million signatures, and if y'all don't pull out of your investment in fossil fuels by this date and this time, we're all going to move our money to these local credit unions. That's power, right? And that's the way that you remove, we have to start thinking about how do we disarm these systems of dominance and oppression. And that's why it's so important for us to think together. There's one more thing that I want to add to that, is that in this massive study of nonviolent movements, Erica Chenoweth and Maria J. Steffen discovered that there was no regime in their study, and they studied 323 conflict situations that could withstand the sustained resistance of 3.5% of the population. Just 3.5% of the population in America. That's like what, 12 million people or something like that. Maybe a little more. The reason why it's so important for us to think about organizing these mass groups of people is because in organizing, okay, so one person reading White Fragility and saying, I'm going to be a better white person, that's great. However, that doesn't really do anything to the prison system, which continues to take the human rights away from millions of people, many of them Black and brown, right? So it's good to read White Fragility and to try to identify those things within yourself and to say, well, I don't want to have a fragile response to race conversations. And that's great, but we should add to that, how are you going to either organize or be among those who are organized to dismantle these systems? And how are you going to be a part of imagining a world where public safety does not mean this kind of constant awareness that those dangerous Black people on the other side of town that I don't know are being held in place by a regime of violence, which is basically what public safety means right now. Right now, when people say, well, who will keep us safe if we defund the police, many of them are tacitly saying, well, who will beat up the Black people if the police, who will keep the Black people under their knee, if we defund the police. So we need to think collectively, because that is the power to have enough force and to act with enough urgency to actually continue to hit the regime of violence until it's no more.
Andre, so good. As I think I speak on behalf of everyone, we'd be giving you a standing ovation if we were in a formal situation right now. Thank you so much for your humanity, for your magic, for this wisdom, for your voice, for your work, for your artistry. I mean, all of it. And I know on our end, we would love to have you back as often
Of course. Yeah,
as
of course.
your time would allow. You've just given us so much. For those of us that I'm putting in the group chat right now, just our information as far as our website, and y'all, the Imaginarium community is a group underneath our Facebook page, We Are Imaginarium, and that is where this recording will live. If you're interested, as I'm sure some of you are, to go back and take better notes and get down with some of what he said to us and challenged us with. Also, if any of you are joining us today and you're not on our email list, we have an email that goes out every Monday morning that's around the themes of body, soul, spirit, community, and delight. Tomorrow is our community email that will go out. Thank you, Malia, who's on this thread, who pushes that out for us. Andre, how can everyone follow you? How can they get on your email list? How can we listen to the podcast, etc.?
Yeah, the best way is to join my email list from my website, which is andrehenry.co. And there's a little black bar at the top of the website that says join the movement. So you can sign up for the Hope and Hard Pills email newsletter there. And I send out a blurb every week about social change, new podcast episodes, music, articles that we've curated about racial justice and social change, and just any events that we're doing.
Love it. He and all of that is a huge resource to us, Imaginarium. For those of you that are involved in everything that we do, I'm telling you, you will benefit deeply from it. Also, if you don't have a mask yet, I encourage you to go get one of our masks. It just simply covers our costs, connected, responsible, magical, and to wear a mask as you go out in public, please, people. As far as other resources, I just wanted to share, a few of us watched the documentary, if you have Netflix and have access to Netflix, called Disclosure this week on transgender lives. It is brilliant and moving and informative and well worth your time to watch that. And I think that's all we have. We end with a toast. And so if you have the ability to get up and grab a water or a Coke or a coffee or whiskey or wine, we want to give you a moment to do that. We'd like to end with sort of a celebration of humanity, just as we started. Again, we appreciate each and every one of you for being on. A special thanks to Andrew again, but thank you for all of you. Your presence, your voice matters here, and it matters in this world. And we hope you'll come back. You'll find out more information about us on the website and on the Facebook page specifically. Okay, so this is a toast to gravity and grace, my good people. Gravity is that which keeps us grounded. So may we have gravity. May we be grounded. May we keep our eyes open and ears open to listen, to unlearn, to see, to learn anew, right? But also grace. And grace is that which keeps us grateful. Grateful that we have breath. Grateful that we can grow. Grateful that we can do better. Grateful that this world can be different. So cheers to you and to gravity and grace. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Andre. You all have a lovely rest of your evening and a good week. Bye-bye.
Great, thank you.